UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena. Are they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, time travelers in origin, or are they simply a result of top-secret military black projects, false flag alien invasion psyop, drones, or other human-made aircraft? Join UFO historian Don Eckert, MUFON State Director for New York Chris DePerno, retired veteran pilot Commander Cobra, and well-esteemed host and researcher Martin Willis as they discuss the latest news and topics regarding UAPs with a no-holds-barred approach on UAP Crossfire.
Welcome, everybody, to UAP Crossfire. This is a show where four alpha males tell you the real deal of what's going on in ufology today. They don't hold back. So on this show, the sparks will fly, as they always do, and we will try to get you the most accurate, the most, possible, the real deal of what's happening in ufology today. So I first want to introduce to everybody, I'm Chris DePerno. I'm the MUFON State Director for New York. I'm a former major crimes detective, and I look at ufology as I would any other kind of criminal case. I follow the evidence. Right next to me is Martin Willis. Now, Martin Willis is probably one of the best researchers in ufology today. He has his own podcast, which is probably one of the most popular podcasts in UFO studies. So if you don't see this show, make sure you get Martin's show. Right next to him is my man, Commander Cobra. As you can see, Commander Cobra is a former pilot and an aviation expert, and the man knows his stuff. But I got somebody else better for you. The historian, the silverback of ufology himself, the man who tells it the way it is. You never know what's going to come out of his mouth. My man, Don Eckert. Hello, Don. And of course, we got a special. Yeah, that's right. And of course, we got a special guest tonight. A special guest. He is probably one of the top ufologists in the world. I think he's great. I've worked on projects with him, and I'm going to be working on another project with him sometime, hopefully this summer. And he's going to talk about crash retrievals and maybe a bit about Area 51. And that is Michael Schratt. Hello, Michael. How are you?
Good to be with you. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I'm going to do a round table first. I want to get everybody's opinion of crash retrievals. Let's start with crash retrievals. Martin, do you really think we got crashes?
Oh,
you're muted, Martin. What a way to start. Everybody's muted.
Unmute there, Martin.
I'm mute, Martin.
All right. I'm sorry. I heard some background noise, so I was just trying to see where it's coming from. But anyway, sorry about that. So I think it's very possible, when David Grush came out with that, I went, oh my God, that was like, wow, can this really happen? Do we really have this? And I don't know, and also Michael, has done a lot of work on this research as well. But I want to pull this up because this just came out today. Let me just get this up here and hang on just one second. And that is this. This article came out. And it's basically, Jeremy Corbell is right now saying that the government in the U.S., he confirms that they actually have functioning craft, had for many years. He goes through Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and all that. And so anyway, I don't know what to think about that. The only thing is when articles come out like this and people make claims like this, we're not seeing any of the nuts and bolts. That's the thing, and so he's confirming, but who is he? He's calls himself a journalist, filmmaker. I'm not sure what to think about that whole thing. So are we,
Is he really
do we have this?
Anything new though, Martin? I mean, Bob Lazar says we got 9 crafts, we got a sports model, the whole bit, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know what I'm not going to start about Bob Lazar, but
I'm not saying he's right
yeah,
or wrong, but it's
yeah,
another story. You know what I mean?
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then next to Martin is Commander Cobra. Commander, crash retrievals.
Well, it's well within our normal operating procedure. You could go back to Operation Paperclip, retrieving the scientists and the engineering, everything that wasn't nailed down, especially on aircraft. Technology was brought back during World War II. Um, I think it's probably the basis of probably one of the earliest discussions of then famed Nazi anti-gravity air craft that was, I don't know, I think aircraft's the right term to use, but craft that was possibly brought back. You look at what happened around Roswell, putting no spin on what Roswell is. There was crash retrieval there. The Aztec UFO crash incident points to an extensive retrieval operation. Many moons back on Mac Maloney's Military X-Files, he had a guest. I was not on the show, but I was chatting with the show host that night. And the gentleman that was speaking that night talked about recovery operations that went on in then East Germany, something that I had some firsthand familiarity with, and some of the things that he was putting out for recovery. Of course, he was claiming that it was extraterrestrial craft, was very accurate, and then there were some things that really thrown off. So it doesn't seem out of character based on actual recovery, and this has gone on since, I mean, the military, but especially since we started flying, even in World War I, has tried to recover the other, the opponent's aircraft, and try to reverse engineer, understand how it flew, figure out flaws or weaknesses, and then maybe get a gain on technology. So that's not an uncommon process at all. Martin, on the article you sent, I thought was interesting. Corbell it definitely has a lot of cachet right now with the things that he's throwing up. There's no doubt about it that we work in a world of clicks and popularity and views and things like that. But the first comment that is in that article is really worth taking a peek at. And I've seen this now a number of times where a number of people thought this was the go-to guy, and they feel that he is an agent of disinformation, that he's working, quote unquote, for the other side. And I thought that was a pretty interesting remark. It's the very first comment in this article, and it's not dissimilar to some other things that I have seen that have come up. So, yep, I have no doubt that if we have had contact and we have recovered, or we had the ability to recover, we are, and that's not going to sit idle, that you would try to work that technology.
Let me ask you a question, Commander, before I go to Don. So Jeremy Corbell puts us to this article. He says, yeah, we have working crafts there, but he's come out with a lot of things that he hasn't proven. It's, it's this third party, second party kind of thing where he's talking about, well, I heard this, or I got a source that I won't name here, and I got this over here. I want to see one person come out and say, I worked there, here's the photo, here's a piece of the material, this is what it really is. And we haven't gotten to that point yet, I don't think. Have we, Commander?
I don't think so. I think whatever is real, there is equal, if not greater, active harnessing what is real against disinformation, or whatever the popular term is. But it's to shroud that. We don't have a unified effort on this. You have different factions and groups within government circles, agencies, all of it at play, that are vying for controlling this narrative that's going on with this. That's how I look at it, based on personal experience, right up to date, on almost everything we engage with. And it does fall flat when you make claims and you can't really produce simple, tangible what we would call evidence or information or articles that you can at least draw a conclusion on. Roswell, there's been a lot of stuff that talked about what people gathered up, and metal that could bend and was soft and all, and I've heard explanations what that was, but at least there was people that made reports, people like you and Don and Martin that document and look at the archives of documented evidence that can at least pull something of some substance to make a conclusion based on that. These second and third party inputs really are difficult, and they get tiresome after the first few rounds of it.
So here's an interesting thing. Probably Roswell is the most famous crash story of our century. Am I correct on that, Commander?
I would say that it gathers the most attention. I am one that's not convinced that Roswell was extraterrestrial based on all the other things that have gone on.
And why can't David Grush talk about it?
Well, I think what's been talked about with the surveillance, the nuclear or then probably atomic surveillance balloon system that they had put up to do this, was one of the reasons that was shrouded. If you look at the whole arc of Roswell, I'm not convinced with the gaps and then the renaissance that occurs, because it looks like something really interesting. And then in the 70s is when it gets a second life and comes on. So that is what kind of throws me off with it. And then, as you guys know, and I know I'm in the minority, I've tracked the Aztec UFO information for a number of years, and that has been categorically really well researched, and the people that did the primary research didn't really have a particular bend that they were trying to prove. They just wanted to unearth all the facts that they get unearthed. That's the kind of approach that I like, because that would help you get it. That's why I had doubts on Roswell. There are things that have happened around the area of Roswell that are, without question to me, UFO kind of ET kind of things that don't get any of the attention that the said crash did.
Good. Let's go to Don. Don, what do you think of crash retrievals?
Okay, in order to really have a firm handle on this, you've really got to go back into the past. You got to go back and study the history. And as it turns out, in the early to mid 50s, there was a United States government program that came out called Project Moondust. This saw the light of day when it was uncovered by a former UFO researcher, Army veteran by the name of Clifford Stone. Now, Cliff has since passed on. But basically, if you read the document, what this program was about was recovering foreign technology, okay? And it didn't specify necessarily that it came from a potential enemy or opponent or from somewhere else. But somebody was picking up stuff somewhere. Now, it's not quite been a year when I wrote a paper concerned with the disclosure process. Near the end of this document, I discussed in some depth, I probably could have gone a lot deeper, but I didn't want to write a book at the time. But what I discussed were the fact that people like Grouch made the claim, although granted, he did not have, and he stated he did not have firsthand information, that the government had picked up perhaps as many as 12 or more craft that for one reason or another came down. Now, I maintained then, and I still do today, that it's my opinion, with some data behind it to support that a number of these supposed crashes very well may have been the result of a hostile action. In other words, a shoot down. Now, whether it was our forces that shot these things down or somebody else's, okay, that's up for discussion. But I asked myself during this period when I was doing a lot of research, does it make sense that if any of these objects that are coming here came from another star system, and I mean the technology would have been beyond breathtaking, and got here to suddenly crash, that made no sense to me. However, being a combat vet from Southeast Asia, I've seen a lot of aircraft go down as a result of hostile action. That seemed to resonate with me. Now, all you guys read that paper. None of you seem to have any firm contrary opinions to that conclusion. And if so, I'd love to hear it. But the bottom line is, yes, I have no doubt that we, in fact, did recover probably a number of these things. God only knows why. As far as the Bob Lazar thing goes, Lazar, I met him right after George Knapp revealed him to the world. I've been to his house when he lived in Las Vegas several times. And being a former criminal investigator, medically retired, I put on my cop hat when I interviewed Lazar. And I got to tell you, I credit myself with having a pretty good bullshit detector, okay? And never once during those meetings with him, nor for years after, did I ever detect or get a gut feeling that he was trying to put one over on everybody. So whatever happened to him when he alleges employment out at Area 51, Site S4, I am convinced that he was convinced that we have those things. Now, the big question, if any of that is true, that we do have, he stated, 9 craft. He was a first-hand witness, if you buy his story. And according to what he said in numerous interviews, he worked on one of those craft.
The sports model.
Right, the gravity generator and propulsion. And he never stated that he saw any damage to this thing at all. It was as if someone or something gifted these things. Now, how you explain that, I don't know. It's beyond me. Whether they were archaeologically recovered or somebody brought one down and for whatever reason left the scene and it was there to be picked up, who knows? But I got to say, I have no doubt that we do have our hands on at least several of these things. Then, one more thing before I pass it back to you, Chris. I did a paper several years ago on the Admiral Thomas Wilson situation, and where a scientist was talking to this
Eric
man
Davis?
who at the time, was the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA, the military's version of the CIA. And he agreed to do a little investigation to find out if he could find anything to corroborate a lot of what he was hearing. He ended up flying out to the West Coast to an unnamed aviation corporation that purportedly had at least one of these craft that it was working on in order to back engineer. okay, the technology that was there on board the craft, and was shut entirely out, sent back to Washington basically with his tail between his legs. So that is something else that I put into my gray basket that says, yeah, it would appear that something is there. So, I think we do, Chris. I think we do.
Now, before we get to Michael, I want to ask Martin a question, because Martin, there is something that I think that you and I both agree on, but it's come out from David Grush, and this makes me a little concerned about David Grush. He talks about the 1933 retrieval that went to the Vatican. And I remember you telling me that, nah, Chris, I think that's a hoax. I think that thing was all garbage. Am I correct in saying that, Martin?
There's been a lot of research on that one in particular. And if you ask Kevin Randall, who is on this show, he's done a lot of work on that. And he's 100% convinced that that particular one's a hoax, which makes me think that, David was fed that information and just, along with whatever else he was. And I guess I can announce this on the show. I was just in touch to David about another issue. And he is saying that right now he's working on behind the scenes on something really major that we're all going to know about in a while. So that's kind of exciting. And I wasn't told not to say anything, so I'm getting that out there.
That's awesome. I can't wait to hear it. So did he tell you what he's working on, or you have to keep that quiet?
He did not tell me. No.
Well, now we come to Michael Schratt. Now, of course, Michael Schratt is an expert on crash retrievals, one of the top ufologists in the world. All right, Michael, you're in the hot seat now.
Don't forget to unmute. Yeah.
I got it. Good to be with you, gentlemen. So I think, as kind of all of you had hinted to, it really boils down to the credibility of the first-hand military witnesses. That's what this thing really boils down to. And, do we have any proof, any physical evidence that would help support this claim of crash retrievals? And I would just point out to Leonard's book here, where there's dozens upon dozens of alleged crash retrieval cases. And looking at these cases, I started seeing this pattern develop where one case would have a feature that was almost identical to another feature. And I know that the two witnesses didn't know each other because they were separated by time and space. I'll give you an example. There's a case in 1963 where a U.S. Marine was sent to an undisclosed location where they were trying to use diamond tip drill bits to get inside this craft. Now, there's a case also in 1946 where they were also using diamond tip drill bits. And I've got another case that also mentions these diamond tip drill bits. I'm certain that these witnesses did not know each other. Now, that doesn't prove anything, but looking through the cases, you can kind of see how this tapestry comes together, because there's a common denominator on a number of these cases, and the diamond tip drill bits is just one example.
Well, all right, Michael, you said that we had several crash retrievals, but normally most people say we've only had 10 or 12. What's the mix-up with the numbers?
Well, looking at the 65 three-ring binders that are under the jurisdiction of MUFON at Lunken Airport in Cincinnati. So you've got 65 three-ring binders there, and then you've got Leonard's book. I counted a lot more than 2 dozen, for sure, okay? A whole lot more than 2 dozen. And just going through the material, we've got the pilots, we've got people who were allegedly on the crash retrieval team, people who picked up things in Salinas, California. This is in the Stringfield collection. It never even made it into his book. It was in the private office worker dictation notes. That case never even made it in the book. So it's almost a pre-Roswell case. But that case is in there. They have a map there. They have a sketch of what the craft looked like. There were 2 19-year-old boys that were working in a carrot patch that claimed they saw this. So their testimony, I guess, I don't even know if they're still alive anymore, but there are certainly more than 24 when you look at all 65 3-ring binders.
Okay. All right. So we've got these crash retrievals now, and I'm going to go around again here, but I want to start with Michael the first time. So we got this crash retrievals. Have we done anything with it as far as being able to conquer gravity? Do you think right now we have anti-gravity?
Absolutely, I do. And we can look at the March 23rd, 1966 Temple, Oklahoma case with Eddie Laxon, who absolutely ran across one of our vehicles. This is not an ET craft. He said it himself. It had the letters written in black letters vertically, TL4768 written on the side of the craft. There was a man standing next to it. He was not an alien. He was not an ET. He was an Army person. He was wearing 2-piece green military fatigues. He had a baseball cap with the bill turned up. In fact, Eddie said that if he saw him later the afternoon in town, he'd recognize him. That's how close he was. So this was back in March of 1966. By at least October 1954, it's believed that they made the breakthrough. So absolutely, I believe we have conquered it.
Okay, but so we don't see anything even close to propulsion systems that we have now. We're just using liquid fuel. Would you think if we did this in the 1930s, don't you think by now we would have had something out there?
Well, it's still profitable for the defense contractors to keep selling obsolete F-15s and F-16s. Why would you want to usurp all of your billion-dollar defense contractor bonanzas by rolling out this new technology that makes all of this other stuff obsolete? It's still a cash cow for these defense contractors. You can keep on making these, third-generation stealth aircraft, no problem. I mean, they're not gonna get away from making this profit when they can still do it. They can still milk the system with these old obsolete aircraft. If they brought in something like what Eddie Laxon saw back in 1966, they all go out of business. That's how this thing is being run.
Martin, you think we got anti-gravity?
I think it's very possible. I want to address something though, Michael.
Yep.
And that is, I understand exactly what you're saying, and it does make a lot of sense in that way. But wouldn't you think that there'd be someone in the Defense Department, if they knew that we had this technology, that would say, hey, this is something we can make a fortune on? And I mean, a private contractor, and want to get it out there. Wouldn't that seem, I understand about them making money, but wouldn't they could make so much more money with a technology that is so advanced like that, I would think.
Well, some people have come forward. And the other thing to keep in mind, too, is that when you're talking about ACE and the whole technology, when you're talking about these type assets, it's really the crown jewels. They are not going to roll this out for a little bit of a skirmish. These things are maintained for something completely different altogether. And there is a sinister part of this that I generally don't like to go down that road. But
what's the sinister part, Michael?
Well, okay, so how are they funding these? Okay, because you can only go so far with black programs. You can only go so far with classified black budgets, even though it's billions of dollars per year. There is a contingency to this where you've got drug running, you've got illegal weapon sales, you've even got trafficking going on. This is what's partially paying for all of these black programs. It's not just things that have no congressional oversight and no public scrutiny. It gets a lot more murky and a lot more deep, and something that I generally don't get into, because I'm totally all about the technology, all about the nuts and bolts. But this other part of it, at this point in the game, we cannot discount it. And like I always say, this is really the final curtain call on crash retrievals, because all of the legacy witnesses that Leonard Stringfield had tracked down that were involved in these things in the 40s and 50s, they're almost all dead now. Right. So it's imperative upon all of us and people like us to try to track down these old legacy witnesses so that we can find their bosses that will lead us to not only the craft, but also the bodies as well.
Michael, didn't you tell us one time that you thought some of the B-2 bombers might have had some anti-gravity? Am I correct on that?
There's been some talk about this, that the B-2 electrically charges the leading edge of the wing to reduce the radar cross signature, and then negatively charges the exhaust gases. And when you do that, now you're kind of in the realm of an electrogravitic propulsion system, and you're creating a gravity depression in front of the aircraft and a gravity hill in back of the aircraft, pushing it across the sky. Now it's difficult to prove this, but there's been books about this. There's been articles written about this. Paul Leoviolette did an entire chapter about this in his book. So there's some paperwork to back it up.
Commander.
Well,
anti-gravity.
I'm going to add one more thing to Michael's, I think, spot on observation and comment. If you have, and I have no doubt that we have anti-gravity to answer the question to enter this discussion, but if you have taken a huge leap like this, and your opposition or potential opposition doesn't, they still have a nuclear capability. If you show them that they can completely be disarmed, that make all null and void, but you don't have sufficient numbers, you may force them into a corner where they think it's better to strike now and see what we can get. This could even go as far, if you take this kind of discussion far enough, and I thought I saw a little nod from Michael, and I think him and I are on the same wavelength with this. You can reveal certain things. You know, the great Manhattan Project discussion. Maybe we should just show the people of the world this power, and then everyone will lay down their arms. I don't think that would have worked personally, just looking at the times. But now you apply that to this situation. You reveal at the highest levels what's going on and the kind of part. Now, why wouldn't we just knock off all the nonsense? Because the nonsense is what's making the merry-go-round go round, and the little horses and flying camels and whatever else go up and down on the poles, and we're not going to change it. There's a number of times where you have seen small breakouts in technology that have been stomped by the established business or the established capabilities that are online, because they can't turn around tooling fast enough. They can't change. They want a controlled, although they'll tell you they want an organized transition, they want a controlled transition, because they want to control how it is moving to get to whatever is next. And that's why you'll see us continue to play these games that we do, because this is how basically a world economy is being done. And I completely agree with Michael's take on that. And I'm going to put a quick question to you, Michael. Do you think some of the breakouts that we see of technology, especially when it's a rapid change-up, is something that is these revolutionary leaps instead of an evolutionary outcome? When we make a huge jump, is because of this, someone decides now's the time to come out and do this. If you look at the things that came out approximately 10 years after World War II, there are huge leaps that aren't really progressive leaps, especially in electronics, especially in computers, and the processing that, the ability to process that information, and the shrinking down of technology. It really has always appeared to me those were junctures where, okay, we're ready to take this to market, we're ready to control the entire process, and we are ready to establish leadership in the world by having this technology. Your thoughts, sir?
Okay. I want to give you a couple of, at least one example of a technology that they already have, but they won't allow this technology to trickle down. For instance, if you go to any air show, okay, and you have an F-15 flyby or you have an F-16 flyby, and they go a little bit over Mach 1. So let's just say they go Mach 1.2 and they fly right down the flight line here. You're going to hear a big sonic boom, okay? If you look at the reference works from Northrop back as early as the 1960s, and I've got the patents and I've got the paperwork here, They figured out a way to reduce and basically suppress the entire sonic boom signature as early as the 1960s. So why isn't this being applied to commercial airliners? They can make planes a lot more efficient. They can suck in the boundary layer. They can charge the leading edge of the wing. They can create an electrostatic plasma ahead of the aircraft, massaging the air molecules, essentially allowing the sonic boom to be almost completely suppressed. That stuff has never trickled down to the commercial industry, and they're going to keep it under wraps because they want to apply it to these other ace in the hole technology. I don't know if we're ever going to see this, but it's been over 50 years from the first flight of the 747, and we're not flying any faster now with our commercial airliners than we were back in 1969. So you can see something's wrong with this picture here.
Well, some would say we may have even taken a few steps back.
Absolutely.
That is true. I mean, the flight time from New York to Paris is the same as it was back in the 60s, right, Michael?
It's been over 50 years, and we're not flying any faster now. Talk about any industry, commercial industry, anything, automobile, computers, medical industry. You've got this crescendo of technology that goes up. It doesn't go back. But yet when you get to aerospace, they will not allow that technology to trickle down to the commercial airline industry. And we're all suffering from it. And even Gordon Cooper mentioned that we're 100 years behind where we should be right now, directly from.
Well, at least we have doors falling off of aircraft these days.
I know.
Well, the Concorde jet, that was, really something, the high altitude, less air, faster speeds, all that. But, I guess there was issues with it. It was not making the money worth it. So they retired it, I guess.
Martin,
the other problem is they couldn't fly it over the continental United States.
Right, because of the noise that was on there.
Correct.
So it was not a refinement. It was a bludgeoning of the technology at the time. And I can remember being in part of the early in my career in aviation, that there was discussions, and I know Michael's going to crack up when I say this, that the flying public doesn't want to travel faster than what we're doing in jets. It's comfortable for people to fly at these speeds, to go on with this. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you can be someplace in 2 hours instead of 6 or 8 hours, you want to be there. You will take the time to adjust to a local time change and not have spent 6 to 8 hours when you could have spent 2 hours. And one thing that Michael touched upon that cannot be underemphasized, the safety factor of when you lower the amount of time that you are physically flying is a tangible benefit to reducing your exposure when you are above the surface of the earth. It provides a huge breakdown or breakout from that. Absolutely, something doesn't add up well when you look at where we are today and what we think we possibly could have.
Don, I want to get to you. Anti-gravity. Yes, no, or maybe?
Undoubtedly, I think we do. We all know that at the end of World War II, when the Nazi Germans were defeated, we grabbed every German scientist we could lay our hands on that the Soviet Union didn't grab first. And one of those guys was actually the father or godfather of all German rocketry, Dr. Hermann Oberth. Now, we all know who Wernher von Braun is. People talk about him even today. Very seldom do you hear Hermann Oberth. But before the military got their mitts on him, one of the last public appearances he was at, circa 57, 58, he was being questioned by the press corps, and he stated, and I am paraphrasing, that we are currently working on anti-gravity research, etc. And I believe that within a few years, we will be using this in order to go to the moon. That was 57, 58. 60 years ago plus. Now, the bottom line is, do we really think that it stopped there because it went totally black at that time? No, I think we continued on. And today, okay, here it is, 2024. We have, among other things today, something called the Space Force. All right, the Space Force. And I have talked to some people in the last several years that have hinted broadly that we have a secret space fleet. The
That was going to be my
likelihood
next question.
the likelihood of that, I think, is pretty damned high. And if we do we really think they're using chemical rockets? I find that highly unlikely. So, yeah, I have no doubt, Chris, if I had to lay $100 bill down in a bet, I would definitely do it, saying that I believe we have that technology working today.
Well, I will tell you one thing that kind of struck me funny. I read a quote from J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan said that if I can't put a meter on it, I don't want it out there, which makes perfect sense of why we see some of this technology not out there. It's not profitable to them yet. When it becomes profitable, we'll probably see that, and it'll be very expensive. So I'd like to get to my next question. I'll go around
Before you do that, may
go
I
ahead.
interrupt you?
Yeah,
Because I never really got to answer you about the anti-gravity. I asked Michael a question.
Okay, go for it, Martin.
Yeah.
You got it, buddy.
But actually, I want to ask Michael another question about anti-gravity. Michael, what are your thoughts? A lot of people have said to me over the years that the triangle that you see so often that floats over and has the three lights and maybe the center light as well, they think it's our technology, anti-gravity. And even though, sometimes I would say, hey, look, people are saying it's a mile wide or something like that. And a lot of people are convinced that that's our hidden technology. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, so two quick examples. Just by going over the eyewitness testimony. So you've got 1989, you've got 1990 Belgium Triangle. What did the people report seeing and hearing? Number one, they reported seeing tubes, pipes, and cylinders on the bottom of the Belgium Triangle. Number two, they also recalled hearing a low-frequency electrical humming noise like a sewing machine or an electrical transformer. So these are indicative of a man-made technology. Now, you factor in January 5th, 2000, Southern Illinois Triangle, where you had these large Arrowhead craft flying overhead. Multiple police officers recalled stating what looked like stacked Legos on the bottom of the craft. And one of them, this is Officer Craig Stevens, he said that the bottom of the craft was trying to camouflage itself with the nighttime sky using this, stealth technology, electrochromic panels, allowing it to blend in with the background. This is another sign of a man-made technology. So when you put these two together and you factor in Edgar Furché and his alleged experience at Area 51, where he said he saw a TR-3B off to the side of the tarmac at the remote test site in Nevada. This is years ago. Some of his information starts circling back, and it lends credibility to these other cases as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good. All right. Let's start with Martin on this one. Martin, we say about anti-gravity. We say about we've got these crash retrievals. Don brought it up. I think it's an interesting topic. Do we have a space force?
A space force? Yes, we do have a space force.
I mean, an outer space force. We have a space force by name, but do we actually have the crafts?
The quote-unquote
out in
secret space force? Is that what you're driving at, Chris?
The secret space force.
Oh, I don't buy into that myself. But
you don't buy into bases on Mars or any of that stuff.
No, it's just my opinion. But I mean, there's just.
But it's very popular. People, I mean,
I
there
know.
have been researchers who said, "Oh my God, we've got cylinders and triangles, and we got." What about with Gary McKenna, where Gary McKenna says, "I've seen a whole list of non-extraterrestrial officers and the whole bit."
Well, I'd like to know more about. I understand there's a film being made right now with him, and I'd really like to know more of what his claims are. Because they seem to have changed, and I would just, from what we first heard, and I don't know what to think about that whole situation myself. So
Commander,
I guess I'll pass it along to Commander.
that's a good thing. Commander, Secret Space Force.
I've always had a lot of problem with it because I probably have fallen somewhat prey to what I consider the nonsense that has been associated with it. And again, it's not because I can't believe that the incredible is credible. It's just that it doesn't seem to have anything I can wrap my my pause onto that makes me feel like I'm close to understanding that. Now, do we have we been running a clandestine space warfare program before the existence of Space Force? Were we doing things like that? Absolutely. No doubt in my mind. But I am convinced that we were probably using more conventional current presented rocket type technologies and that kind of thing going on. I think we've played around that. And I think we're going to continue to do that for the same reasons that we talked about earlier, that there's huge parts of budgets, money, economies, GDPs, all those kinds of things tied up with promulgating this process that we've gone down. But Michael, before we go to the break, and I guess I just saw the flag for a few minutes, I want to put a question to you. No doubt in my mind that some of these craft are around. The TR-3, you know me, I am a complete, absolute fanboy for the Black Triangle aircraft. I mean, if you want to see me get all sorority sister, you got the subject to get me going. But do you think that these are still so prohibitively expensive or demanding to fly to execute the capability that's part of the reason why we haven't seen it expand quicker? Or do you think it's more of what I said before? The imbalance is so great that we risk, having a real crisis develop if it popped up.
Good question. Well, if you look at the reference works from Aviation Week and Space Technology, both in 1990 and 1992, they published subsequent articles about classified programs, black aircraft. Now, there's no doubt that there's a whole legion of birds that have not been dislodged, so to speak, from the Reagan administration. Peter Merlin will tell you that, and this is directly from Peter Merlin, that there are twice as many X-planes that are being reported. So if you have an X-50, we're already up to an X-100. So twice as many X-planes as being reported. So what went on during the Reagan administration with the stealth program? What other programs were procured during the Reagan administration that have never been dislodged before? So kind of a quick example, this is a little bit after the time frame, but during the Reagan administration, and I want to ask all of our members here, do you gentlemen recall where you were on January 28th, 1986? Do you remember where you were?
I do.
You do. Okay, Don, anybody else? Martin? Chris? I'm sure you do. I know you do. You just don't think you do, but you do.
Oh, was that the Challenger?
Challenger.
Correct.
Yes, I do remember. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, good. Okay, so when the Challenger exploded, January 28th, 1986, okay, we lost our quote-unquote assured access to space. This is an Air Force term, because there was consequential Titan II booster failures at the same time. So not only did we lose our Titan II booster capability, but we lost the Challenger capability. And we know that the shuttle, a significant majority of space shuttle payloads were classified DoD satellites and other payloads that they don't talk about. So when the Challenger blew up, we lost that complete capability in conjunction with the Titan II boosters. So there was a desperate call, and this is all borne out by Aviation Week Space Technology. Bill Scott had been tracking this and chasing after this for 16 years. Call went out to the defense contractors to actually build, test, and put into the field a rapid response 2-stage to orbit space plane that can be anywhere in the world in less than 2 hours. And Don, you know that John Andrews, our good friend John Andrews, he was hot on the trail of this 2-stage to orbit space plane. In fact, his company built the SR-75 penetrator and the XR-7 Thunderdart. So he was the instrumental in tracking this down. Now, it wasn't until later on, many years later, that James Petty in Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah, saw both the parasitic aircraft and the mothership flying together with the smaller aircraft tucked inside the larger cavity of the mothership. It wasn't until that sighting was sent into Bill Scott that he said, you know what, we've got enough firepower now to go to press. And he wrote his 2006 article that was published in Aviation Week Space Technology talking about the entire Black Star program. So it's very clear that we do have a secret space program. It's a little bit less clear just how many are in the fleet.
Wow.
Don,
Yes.
your opinion on that?
When my wife and I were publishing UFO magazine, we did a series of articles on President Reagan's Star Wars initiative. Okay, we were in touch with, of course, the Pentagon and so on about that. Now, during that period of time, and if you all will recall, and I know it's been practically over 30 years, it's been close to 35 years, but things worldwide were very precarious. The Soviet Union, there was still a Soviet Union then, was battling in Afghanistan. The Americans, the CIA, were fighting a secret war against the Russians by arming the Afghan fighters. We were sending them shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missiles. I mean, things were bad. And there was a lot of terror that this could ultimately blossom into a third world war. Now, one of the technologies that came out of that, and that's, let's face it, Reagan is the reason we bankrupted the Soviet Union. Okay, we just spent them into the ground until their basic economy collapsed. All right, by this Star Wars initiative. But one of the programs involved something called Brilliant Pebbles. Now, I believe I had a closer association with Brilliant Pebbles than I would have believed at the time. In 1992, I was doing a show on Larry King Live on the Challenger, the Space Shuttle STS-48 mission, where it encountered a bogey, all right, while it was overflying Australia and New Zealand. And suddenly there was an event that happened where there was a brilliant flash of light that the shuttle camera picked up, and suddenly something streaked past the shuttle toward this bogey, which immediately made a violent right angle turn, flying out into space and then circling back around. Well, I watched that video over the years. I couldn't tell you how many times, hundreds probably. And I am convinced that that was one of the weapons that was discharged. It's like if you can imagine this, a giant shotgun. Now, the purpose behind it, in the event of an ICBM launch, all right, this weapon system can be deployed as the missile reaches outer space. They can fire this thing, and this massive discharge of pebbles or objects, whatever the hell they've got in there, steel ball bearings, for God's sake, would impact the missile, knocking it out of the sky. But this told me at the time, and I got to say, any aircraft, when the F-117 was finally unveiled before the public, and we had a very interesting article in UFO that talked about that very thing, and a worker at Aerojet Space that was targeted.
Don, I'm going to have to stop you right there because we're going to a hard break. But as soon as we come back, I promise you.
Maybe I will. Maybe, or maybe not. Let's see. All right, we're going to take a short break here, and we'll be back with UAP Crossfire. And we are back with UAP Crossfire. And Don, I'd like you to finish your story. Yeah, where in the heck was I?
How the hell do I know?
You were talking about the worker that you knew from Aerodyne?
Right, Aerojet.
Aerojet.
This guy had been basically a major pain in the tuchus of the DOD and the Pentagon, because he was known for his continuous, constant FOIA requests on all types of things. And one of the things he was trying to basically discover was what at the time they were calling it senior trend. What he was trying to discover about this aircraft, this stealth aircraft. And 3 guys came out to his workplace at Aerojet, government contract facility. My guy, his name was Lee Graham, was a worker out there. He was a good worker from all accounts, but they finally got tired of Graham's continuous FOIA request on anything and everything. He used to copy me on everything he would send in. And honest to God, this is a true story. I still have 2, possibly 3 huge garbage bags in my garage with all of his FOIA requests that he copied me on. So at any rate, they came in. Now, Lee had a secret clearance, not a top secret clearance. He had a secret clearance. And these guys, one of them turned out to be, honest to God, an Air Force general officer. Michael C. Kirby was his name. The other guy was an FBI agent. And I forget now who the third guy was. But they walked in, requested to see Lee Graham. Lee came into this office. They asked Lee's security supervisor to please step outside the room, which, by the way, was totally against policy. The guy acquiesced. Lee then said, one of them opened up a briefcase, pulled out a security agreement, and said, now, we're about to basically give you your birthday present, what you've been asking for. But you've got to sign these security agreements first. Now, here was the kicker. This document specified it was a top secret program. Graham didn't have a top secret clearance, but he signed the document. Okay. They uncovered the stealth fighter, the F-117, and then they turned around and got Lee. They tried to get Lee fired for being exposed to top secret information that he did not have a clearance to see. Now, this was the kind of bullshit, okay, that they pulled on this poor guy who at the time firmly believed in the idea of the American Republic. He became inconvenient, okay? And there was a big legal thing, okay, over him being basically them trying to get him fired. So, these guys will do anything and everything under the guise of national security. And if somebody determines it's national security, whether it is or not, perhaps it's just something that's embarrassing. But, buddy, they'll take you to the wall with it.
Yes, they will. I want to give my 2 cents in about this secret space force. The one thing that always sticks in the back of my mind, and Commander Cobra put it in the private chat, is what Ben Rich said. Remember, Ben Rich gave a very serious lecture, and he says, if you can imagine it, we've already done it, or we thought it wasn't worth it. And that is a very important statement coming from a no-nonsense guy like Ben Rich. Does anybody dispute that?
No, he also said that we have the ability to take ET home.
Correct.
Okay. So, in other words, he was saying, without actually saying, that we apparently have Starflight capable technology. Now, whether we do or not, who knows? But Rich was heading up the skunk works at Lockheed. These were the guys that gave us the U-2 back in the early 50s. They gave us the SR-71 in the late 50s. God only knows. They also came out with the F-117 stealth aircraft. Hey, who's to say? Who's to say that they don't have that technology?
Hey, Michael, I want to throw this to you, something that that Don just kind of alluded to. Doesn't that kind of fit our discussion where the technology has been making leaps and progressing along, but it's been in a very small, very select area? It's not out for mass consumption or probably use.
Yeah, it's kept within the defense contractor field. They want to keep these things under wraps. We're just not going to see that level of technology trickle down. It was Jim Goodall who made that statement when he knew about Ben, okay, where he basically got to Ben just before he passed away, and Ben told him over the phone basically that, Jim, we have things in the Nevada desert that are 50 years beyond what you can comprehend. If you've seen it on Star Wars or Star Trek, we've been there, done that, or decided it wasn't worth the effort. So that was what he mentioned. So this kind of ties into what you guys were talking about before.
That's the exact quote that I put into the chat. I'd love to post it into the ongoing online chat, but I'm restricted from participating directly with the folks that are watching us.
I'll do that.
Thanks.
I'll do that.
Go ahead, Martin. Martin, what do you think about Ben Rich's statement? I mean, you've said that you don't think there's a secret space force, but here's Ben Rich saying that we could take ET home.
Well, no, I've always thought that was a great quote. I think where I draw the line is I've heard so many crazy stories about the secret space program and, the explorations, of planets and things like that. I mean, who am I to say? Possibly we have that technology and can do this.
Well, you accused my shirt tonight of being pajamas. So I mean, come on.
I did. I got away with it too. Yeah.
Let's not air our pajamas or dirty laundry on air.
Well, that's right.
We agreed to that when we were warming up for the show. And
No,
Michael is a special guest. He doesn't need to see this kind of family squabbling.
That's true. I'm sorry, Don. Sorry.
No, you're not, but it was funny.
Yeah.
And they do look like PJs. It looks like something out of LL Bean from my part of the world and your part of the world.
My sister-in-law, it was a Christmas present.
Oh yeah, she really likes you.
So, Martin.
Ouch, that's going to leave a mark. My God.
Yes, Chris.
Martin, getting back to that. So you said there's no secret space force. Ben Rich says that we have the technology to take ET home. Wouldn't you think the defense contractors would make that technology available in a weaponized system?
Well, I will tell you this, the most convincing that I've had on the secret space force is what I just heard from Michael. You know, other than that, I haven't heard anything that I think is convincing, you know, and I've kind of shied away from it because I thought it was a little bit over the top. So I haven't done any deep research. So I'm probably not the guy that should be talking about it, really.
There's no doubt that a lot of the nonsense with the secret space force is wrapped around what actually we think or we have talked about exists, because it's a convenient way to keep it off balance and not reveal what the folks that are running this don't want to come out for whatever reason, justified or not. I'm not going to put a positive or negative on it, but we see this all the time in almost every kind of UAP, UFO event. There's always the what I call the nonsense static that's associated with it. Michael, where are you on that? Do you think I'm going down the wrong alley again, or what?
Well, just if you just look at what the witnesses are telling us, you know, they're talking about fasteners, they're talking about Zeus fasteners, they're talking about seams, they're talking about pipes and cylinders and electrical humming noises on the bottom of these things. Even Stanton Friedman talked about lights and wings on ET spacecraft could only be for decorations. They don't need lights. Why would they need lights? So it's just screaming a man-made technology here.
All right, if you guys don't mind, I want to change up a little bit. I want to play a short video and then go around. It's the new flavor of the month. This is what I call it, as far as what we think this is.
GOP Florida Representative Anna Paulina Luna says Grush used a different term when speaking with her.
I think it's incredibly important to listen to the specific words that Grush uses. You know, Grush never said extraterrestrial or alien. He said interdimensional. It has become apparent that there is a movement, whether it's within the intelligence community or not, to prevent us from finding out more information on this.
Luna would not expand when asked what interdimensional meant, whether this was something which could bend time and space. Other lawmakers accuse the government of deliberately trying to keep Congress in the dark.
All right, so, Michael, I'm going to start with you. This is the new flavor now, interdimensional, because they said, first I want to just tell people in chat, I think David Grush is the real deal. I think he's being fed certain information to be told to us. But I honestly believe he's a patriot, he's a good guy, and he's a very loyal American. But I still think that there are people telling him things, what to say, how to say it, in order for their agenda to get done. But Michael, interdimensional.
Well, whether they're interdimensional or extraterrestrial, I think the bigger picture is let's drill down on all of the physical hardware first. Let's go down that road before we jump on this interdimensional bandwagon. None of the witnesses within the Stringfield collection ever said anything about interdimensional. I'm not saying that's not the case, but I think it's important. Let's exhaust all of the terrestrial explanations for what some of these crash retrievals might be, and let's get to the physical evidence and the bodies that are allegedly at Eglin Air Force Base. Let's get that, and then we can investigate some of these other topics talking about interdimensional.
Okay, but why would they bring up interdimensional now, Michael? I mean, we've been working. We've gone from UFOs
Right.
to UAPs, and now we've gone to interdimensional. So there's an agenda being steered. They're steering us in a certain path, don't you think, Michael? They've gone to three different things.
It kind of sounds like they're trying to steer away from the man-made technology, is what it's kind of sounding like. They're trying to justify it with something far off, when in point of fact, some of it might be a lot closer to home. That's what it sounds like to me.
So what you're trying to say is this may be disinformation.
I don't know if I want to say that, but it just looks like they're steering the narrative away from a much more terrestrial explanation, like using tax dollars, using technology that we've had for 50 years, defense contractor, and then everything that Leonard, we've got cases from people, part of the Tactical Air Command pilots that were going down the rows of hangars at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and they walked into a hangar that had a dish-shaped craft on two engine test stands, and they had like these ropes wrapped around it with stanchions, and there were people with MPs with rifles guarding this thing. And then one of the guards came up to the pilot and said, "You're not supposed to be in here." So he did an about face and walked out, but he was with his fellow pilots. They all saw this craft there. So it's very clear that the witnesses, these credible witnesses, are telling us that they have been seen at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. If you agree with the testimony of Marion Black Mac Magruder, he basically said that everyone thinks that the bodies are at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, but they are not. He said that they are in underground cold storage vaults at Eglin Air Force Base. So how that ties into the interdimensional, that's perhaps beyond me, but we've got multiple cases from credible witnesses telling us that we've got things right here that are terrestrial or could possibly be something else.
Martin, interdimensional, do you think it's a false flag, or do you think there's something to it?
Well, it's always been part of the possibilities, and it kind of explains a lot of, things that people have claimed they've seen, like things blinking in and out. The Ariel school incident where Francis was talking about when he was a kid, watching this being like run toward the pool and skip in and out and moving along. All these weird things. However, if we have craft that we've captured that was interdimensional, it's kind of, you start to think, how could that be? Can something actually go into another dimension and stay there? I don't know how any of that works. It's very puzzling. I don't know the physics, if there's any physics that can be explained on how a dimension would work. But I do think it's kind of interesting that all of a sudden they're focusing. It's like a focus, and that makes me think that, maybe they are trying to steer the conversation. And, I think, Jacques Vallée's thoughts, I agree with him that, there could be what we're seeing could be all kinds of things, not just one thing. So it might be part of the mix. I'm not sure, but I don't think it's the whole answer.
I don't think it is either, but it's very strange, Commander, that a congresswoman would give a news briefing and say, David Grush never said the word extraterrestrial. He never said the word alien, but he did say interdimensional. And now all of a sudden, interdimensional being popped up all over. Commander, what do you think about that?
I'm going to try to unpack. There's a lot of things I want to try to squeeze into this segment.
Go for it, pal.
Well, one of the things that Michael talked about, the pilots walking down the flight line and seeing the saucer craft, the open door, the guards, the setup. I've heard that story. I've never been able to track down any of the people that were associated with it, but I will relate a story that is that I do know a little more depth about. Historically, during Manhattan Project, the pilots that were working on the B-29 that was going to fly They were walking down, same base. It was right field in those days. Patterson had not been at it. And as they were getting prepared, and they still didn't quite know what the special weapon was, they did know they were working on something very unique. The planes had been stripped of almost every defensive armament so they could fly higher and faster. B-29 was a huge, huge technological change for the time. And they walked by, and a hangar door was, a little bit ajar. There wasn't very many people around, but there was this incredible craft that didn't have a propeller. It was pointy. And everyone was talking about jets under their breath, this new super technology that was on. That was completely staged for the members of the 509th to see, because what the security folks were doing is they watched every single one of them intently that had been set up to see this, and what they did. They tracked down one pilot who had actually, in confession, and you have to figure out how they know this, told the Roman Catholic priest, "Father, don't worry about us losing the war. We have aircraft that are coming out. I've seen it. Our technology, we're going to beat the Germans. We're going to beat the Japanese." And the security forces actually jammed up some of these guys because they had talked about what they had seen when they were told, "You will never talk about anything you see while you're on this part of the project." So was that a test for those guys that in the story that Mike related? Don't know. Now let's move over to the physics part of it. It fits a pattern in my mind. There's loyalty tests. There's nonsense that goes on with that for good reasons. I don't mean to be mean when I say nonsense. Just that some things why not. A lot of the things that we deal with and we're talking about are really Newtonian physics. It's the physics that almost all of us have been exposed to in high school, going up into the early stages of college. And then we had the breakout because some things just didn't work. In fact, a lot of us connected because of the theory of relativity that Einstein. There started to show some breakdowns in how all that orderly part worked, and you had to start understanding quantum physics. And no one can really explain every part of it. The folks that understand it can't really explain it to the rest of, or I should say to someone like me, easily. But we know that there are parts that don't fit. Why now do we have this term coming up? First of all, I'm always suspect when anybody, I don't care who they are on Capitol Hill, comes out and says anything. My BS meter is extremely high, and I'm watching them closely because this is the first time this word's used. This is supposed to be something that came out from a closed-door classified meeting. This was the part of the IG brief that they're talking about. So it can be completely bona fide, completely without any problem, discourse whatsoever. Great. I think it fits. I think that if you have figured out a way that you are traveling and not under the same time and space continuum issues that we have, or all the things we're talking about, wonderful. But going back to what Michael said, we have a lot of really basic elementary parts that are on the table that we have not had good answers or presentation on. So I think it fits, but I also think it is a bit of a red herring or a sleight of hand, a diversion to have the new term to move this conversation and constantly keep moving it. And as I've told you guys many times, open sourcing intelligence, this is a handy thing to see. Where does that go? Where did the word go? Where did everyone's conversation on social media and the open exchange, where did it all end up?
Don, interdimensional, your thoughts?
Okay, this is a topic which has the ability to take you much deeper down the rabbit hole than anybody truly wants to go. There are a lot of people that have been studying these concepts like interdimensionality. We live on a brand world. In other words, in a multiverse where we are now this is what is believed, where we are very, very almost within touching distance of other realities. Now, There are people that believe that, for example, the Skinwalker Ranch is one of those areas where other dimensional creatures have come through a window into this reality. Do I believe that? I don't know. I'm a long way from believing in something like that without a hell of a lot of proof. But during the Second World War and immediately following that, there were three guys that were very good friends, and all of them actually are very well known today. There was the Beast, Aleister Crowley, who was hanging out with Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons was the guy that helped create the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and L. Ron Hubbard, who was the creator of the Church of Scientology. My God, what a dossier, huh?
Yeah.
And these guys were banging around doing all types of things. They were all crazed about the ladies, all right? They had that in common, along with a number of other things. But here's where it gets very quirky. Crowley was a practitioner of the deepest, darkest, blackest of magics, okay? And during one of his, I don't know what the hell you would call it, one of his magic shows, if you will, he allegedly brought into this reality a being called Lamb, Lamm, Lamb. Now, if you check that out in your search engine, there are even photographs of this, or not photographs, but drawings of this creature that you can take a look at. And surprisingly, this thing looks very much like a gray alien. Now, at the Pentagon, okay, there was a group, still may be there, I don't know, that was referred to by its collective name, the Collins Elite. Now, when I tried to get Luis Elizondo onto my show, Dark Matters Radio, because I wanted to interview him, and the guy ended up ghosting me. Why, I'm not absolutely sure, but he did. He ghosted me. I had been talking to him about that. He had mentioned that to me. And according to what he told me, this was on the telephone, that he had been talking to some very senior military officers in the Pentagon that apparently belonged to this group, who cautioned Elizondo to stay away from this UFO business because it was all demonic. Okay? They knew, according to what Elizondo said, they knew where these craft, these things were coming from the depths of hell. Now, I don't know if I accept that, but I suppose I could accept the idea from another reality. Apparently, these creatures have an enmity toward humanity for whatever reason, I don't know. But there are enough anecdotal stories, at any rate, to suggest that, in fact, some of these things may, in fact, be interdimensional. Now, what does that mean, interdimensional? Well, the short answer is from another reality that is right next to us, that they either found a soft spot to come here, or perhaps an opening that somebody like Crowley had made, or They just basically developed the technology. Now, do I accept that? No, not on the surface. But on the other hand, I wouldn't discard it either without a heck of a lot more proof. But that's my take on the interdimensional thing, Chris.
I will tell you that the demonic theory is catching some steam. Ever since Lou Elizondo said that the Pentagon, some people, high-ranking people at the Pentagon, there have been researchers now talking about this being all demonic. This is something that's coming right from the Bible, right through the time and space of being from the gates of hell. I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I'm the jury's still out when it comes to
On the
that.
other hand, it could be another dog and pony show.
Well, there's been so many false flags, and that's going to be my next question, is about false flags in the ufology field. But first thing, I want to ask Michael, you got a show coming to KGRA, don't you? Can you tell us a little bit about that show?
I do have a show, and Bill has been very instrumental in helping me put this together. It's called That's Classified. It's going to deal with black budget aircraft, classified programs. It will have some historical UFO cases in there, but I'm going to be provided references, newspaper clippings, names and dates and locations. So this is something that I've kind of thought about for quite a while, and Bill has been very helpful in helping me put it together.
I wish it was something I was interested in, Mike. Maybe I'll be tuning in.
Oh, okay.
Congratulations.
Hey, do you mind?
Go ahead.
Yeah, congratulations, Mike.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I'm really looking forward to it. I just want to, if it's okay, I want to ask Don a real quick question. And when you said that Lou Elizondo ghosted you, did he happen to see a picture of you in that shirt?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, I just wondered. I'm trying to.
And this
You
is
like my shirt? You want me to get you one like it?
Will you please get him a shirt?
Yeah,
Don,
okay.
get him a
All right.
shirt next Christmas, will you?
okay. So Don, here's what's going to happen. That shirt with the glasses, with the alien eye glasses, Martin's going to show up one of these nights. He's going to be dressed properly. Game on.
Hey, don't get my wife upset. That was her
No.
sister.
Oh,
No,
She's
no.
liable to come out here
I
and
know.
and tear everybody a brand new you know what.
Okay.
Interdimensionally.
Yes, there too.
I think we
Okay,
digress a
so-
little. So yeah.
I want to ask Martin a question, if I may. Martin, it's very important for people to know what we think, because we study this. You study it, Commander Cobra, Don, Michael. What are truly stuff that we can look at and say that's really logical, and the false flag disinformation operations that are going on? What do you consider right now disinformation that's going on that you think?
Well, okay. Here's a good example. I mentioned this. I believe it was last week when we were on, where this one girl on TikTok, I guess, with 2 million followers, she saw the Miami marketplace fill up with cop cars. You know, some said there was 100 cruisers. I don't know how many there were, but they were lined up down the street. And it had to do with, people setting off firecrackers, sound like guns and stuff at the mall. All those cruisers showed up. But her rumor was that it was 9-foot aliens. Now, there's a rumor that there's 9-foot aliens, and so the disinformation can go haywire on social media, and it just gets carried and snowballed. Someone hears it, they repeat it, so I think we have, there's a lot to deal with today when it comes to anything like this and how things can be contorted and misunderstood and misrepresented. So it's really tough to get through it all and figure out what is real and what is not. You have to take things case by case when it comes to like a sighting or witnesses or things like that, and try to take a logical approach to it to see if you can rule out, causes or natural things that it could be and all that stuff. So I think we're in a tough time. There's a lot of information getting thrown at us all the time from every direction, and it's really hard to sort it out. So I don't know what the right answer to it all is. I think check your sources, really look into something instead of just, passing along the information that may not be accurate.
Now, I remember you had a show, and this really impressed me, Martin. You had a show with a person telling you some really wild and crazy things that you actually kicked him off the show. You said, I don't believe what you're telling me. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to put my audience through. And I thought that was really gutsy of you.
Was it Corey Good?
What's that? It wasn't Don Eckert. Okay?
I said, was it Corey Good?
No, I can't. No, it wasn't. He was not on my show. But I can't remember the gentleman's name. But he was on Coast to Coast a week later, saying the same story all the way through. And it was just so unbelievable. And I don't want to waste time of the show to go into the details of it. But there was a reason why I booted that particular one. Yes.
Commander Cobra. Disinformation, false flags are flying all over the place. What's your opinion of that?
Well, you guys have heard me. First of all, part of it is an on-purpose orchestration, an intelligence gathering tool. It's very inexpensive. You can use non-security clearance people. You can put things into. And this is legitimate. I mean, there is legitimate reasons that you want to do this. Say you're concerned about a certain type of VIP coming into an area. So you start to put in, you feed into the media stream, the social media streams, that individual is going to be traveling to this location on these dates and times. And you may do it, initially very, very clandestinely, like, it's really very carefully held information, and get that lined up. And then you watch to see who is tracking that information, who is sending it, where it goes. And you can start to gather some security kind of concerns. You can start to see where you possibly have agents or cells that are interested in that. Legitimate stuff. It makes sense. And of course, the age that we live in, with the level of participation that the public, the global public, has with social media, and the algorithms that are out there and the computing power that's out there that can be handheld now, technology, there's a lot you can do with it. It's also very useful if you're a person that, or an entity, or excuse me, not an entity, but a group or a organization that wants to maintain control or even push it into a different direction. And this is kind of the things we talked about in the first hour with Michael. How are you paying for these projects? How do you pay for these programs? How do you continue to do what you want to do and keep the conversation going? And it's convenient to have regional conflicts. It's terrible that people are losing their lives, but, business has to go on, and we have to, continually keep the merry-go-round going around. So there's no doubt in my mind that this process has become embedded, but it's not new. This goes back to the time of the printing press and different politicians and groups creating newspapers and sending them out to shape public opinion on any issue or a candidate or things like that. So none of that, it seems very different. PsyOps is a big part of what you do in psychological operations. There was a incredible guest I had many years back on my show who talked about in Vietnam. Don may be able to back this up a little bit. The belief system, religious belief system, is that if a indigenous person from Southeast Asia died and their body wasn't properly attended to, their spirit would be trapped. They would be forced to wander on the earth because it wouldn't be properly released, in a kind of a religious tenet that's very popular with Eastern philosophies.
They actually used that,
right? And they were putting it on loudspeakers, telling the Vietnam and other people
over the jungle
at night.
At night, yeah, with the sound
to scare them, and then they would put these incredible chanting haunting kind of voice over tracks to make it sound like those were these lost souls, these damned souls, because they were fighting, and they would tell them, don't fight, go back to your villages, throw down your arms. This is not worth damning your soul to hell. And
you know what they did in the Philippines too, right?
Correct.
The Hucks, the vampires.
Right.
They would go in, find these terrorists they were looking for, get them, hang them upside down, bleed them dry, okay, cut their throat, let the blood all out, and then vampires got blamed for it.
Someday I have to tell you guys a very funny story about vampires when I was working out of Lebanon. A different story. Nothing like that was happening, but it's just a hilarious story of when you have time in your hands and occasionally a shell is dropping onto where you're at, and you're just trying to kill the time, and you're talking with folks and some of the poor locals. It's a great story sometimes. So, Chris, hopefully I answered your question. I really do think.
You did. And so the question I have now is for Don. Don, false flags, disinformation, the whole gamut. How are we going to find out the real truth with all this craziness, like you mentioned, Corey Good's story and some of the other stories that are out there?
We're not. Okay? We're not. We're not meant to. People will probably go to their grave making sure we don't, because, hey, we already know it. But to actually have the proof that the government is behind this, well, not the monolithic government, but various agencies, bureaucracies, what have you, are running these programs. Look, from day one of the UFO phenomena, okay, it really got its push when Kenneth Arnold had his sighting in June of 47. Then, of course, immediately on the heels of that, Roswell. The stories already started, okay? Look what General Ramey did on the heels of the newspaper story that the Army, the 509th, recovered a flying disc. The next day, I've got the copy of the headline. They emptied the Roswell saucer. It was actually a weather balloon. Now, here's the question you got to ask yourself. The intelligence officer at the time, Major Jesse Marcel, a World War II veteran, okay? The man that was the intelligence officer of the most elite military organization on the globe in 1947, the 509th, the only place where nuclear weapons were stored and could be deployed by POTUS if the need arose. Okay, there was no place more elite than that, and this guy is going to mistake a weather balloon for a flying disc. Okay,
Jesse Marcel was also a radar expert in radar, so he would know.
Well, of course he would know. And who was on his heels? A CIC agent by the name of Sheridan Cabot, okay, that immediately came out to piss all over this business about flying saucers. It started at the inception of the public knowledge that something weird was flying in the sky. So yeah, this is never going to go away. It's always going to be in the toolbox to use. And we schlubs in the public, unfortunately, end up being the butt of the joke.
And I agree with you. Michael, I want to ask you a question that we did on Don Eckert's show, Dark Matters, because it's important to me. As a major crimes detective, I caught something that David Grush said, and it's been sticking with me, and I'm looking at it, and I actually looked and found some information, and I think he's onto something. I don't think it's a false flag when he said people have been murdered. And the reason I say that, I did some research on a man called Stan Myers. You ever heard of Stan Myers?
I have heard of the name, yes.
Stan Myers invented a car that runs on water. You could put snow in there. You could put salt water. And he mysteriously died under very strange circumstances. And his patent, along with 5,000 other patents, have been classified by the U.S. government. You talked a little bit before about nefarious things. Stephen Greer has talked about very nefarious things happening. What's your take? Do you honestly believe that they would kill over this idea?
I do believe they would kill over this idea, absolutely, because you're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar industry, and they absolutely don't want anything upsetting the apple cart, because if you roll out this technology that they've allegedly received from Crash Retrievals, you're talking about a level of technology where they're exploiting the propulsion systems for weapons research and free energy research. These technologies associated with these vehicles could absolutely have a geopolitical impact, thereby basically making the oil industry obsolete, internal combustion engines obsolete. You've got the coal fire plants, you've got the nuclear power plants, you've got the solar plants, you've got the windmill farms. All of these $1,000,000, $1 billion, $1 trillion industries would be obsolete overnight if they let this technology out. And so it's clear that they'll stop at nothing to keep this under wraps, and that includes wet works, you could say. Mm-hmm.
Martin, you've interviewed some of the top ufologists in the world, and I praise you for that. Have you ever come across any of them saying something about killing people or knowing that people have been killed?
Not firsthand any. No, I've only heard people allude to it. Mostly threats. That's what I've often heard, that people have been threatened, and many times I've heard that. But never any physical harm. But maybe physical harm threatened, but not any further than that.
Commander.
Couple ways to go. I threw it into the private chat. When Nikola Tesla passed away, it's pretty obvious that all his technical papers were pretty quickly seized. A number of things that he was working on, disappeared. That whole story has gone, and it has a life of its own. There's people that you can go online and they claim that you can now get your hands. You can see a lot of the things that he had that were taken. Why would something like that happen? Because upsetting the apple cart, not letting the merry-go-round continue with the people that are passing out the tickets and collecting the fee is a big deal. It's a big motivator. And then you have all these other lofty things that are, I think, can sometimes be, it's for the good of the public. It's public order. It's, we want to believe that we have liberty, but you don't really, all this stuff goes in there. So, yeah, I don't see, it doesn't surprise me. I think some people probably have lost their life going into areas where they believe that this is where extraterrestrial or aircraft are there, and they crossed into security zones that are marked. Deadly force will be used. In fact, at work, we just had somebody who crossed the red line on a flight line because he didn't know about the red line. He missed that briefing. And he was gently placed on the tarmac and detained by security because he was wandering into an area where he wasn't supposed to go. So do you think that happened? Now, I think, Chris, honestly, what you're driving at is their organized murder, is their organized assassination to control this. I don't think we should ever get too far off to think that we are not capable of that.
I think we're very capable of it.
And I think that this is, if the things that we talk about week to week here and other folks here on KGRA talk about, there's no doubt in my mind that there are people that believe they are justified to do that. We take out people on a lot less. And it all boils down in Commander Cover's world is no one's held accountable anymore. Things get screwed up, You don't see people at least getting fired or having any shame to be associated with it. We just wait for the news cycle. It goes away. You wash it through a couple of times, and we're on to the next thing. And I think that that's part of it.
Don, why don't you put your criminal investigator's hat on?
Well, in my document, my paper I wrote that you guys read, I basically detailed why 1947 was such a pivotal year. In the space of just a couple of months, number one, the National Security Act was signed into law, which, under the guise of national security, up to and including premeditated murder, is justifiable and legal once that act is invoked. That during World War II, other than the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, we did not have a civilian spy agency. But yet, on the heels of the Roswell event, suddenly the Central Intelligence Agency came into existence. And the United States Army Air Corps, which had been part of the U.S. Army, was stripped from the Army and turned into its own service organization, the United States Air Force. So a lot of things happened literally on the heels of whatever it was at Roswell. So to answer your question, if somebody stepped into it big enough, I have no doubt in my mind that if he was deemed a security risk, they take him out.
And how many people have faced ruin and other activities with being hauled into court, IRS audits, all what they would call the levers of government, the full force of government brought down on them. So there's a lot of things you can do to drive people either to silence or slash insanity to all the other tragic ends that can come out of it.
Look at Gary McKinnon. Gary McKinnon was the one that found the documents on the extraterrestrial officers, and the United States have been trying to extradite him for 10 years until the British government said it's not going to happen. But I mean, they tried to put him in prison. I mean, so that you're right, Commander. They don't have to kill you. They will kill you, but they don't have to. They just destroy you and make you either look stupid or incompetent or whatever.
Well, McKinnon did admit that he had a real sweet taste for weed. So during this incident where he supposedly broke into NASA computers and what have you, I mean, there is that. He admitted he was blowing a lot of dope. So there you go.
And there's always a story, a backstory to the story. So, Michael, what are you going to be talking about on your new show?
We'll be talking about the black budget, and I'm going to be talking about the newspaper clippings. I'm going to be giving examples of graphs, where you can find the information. And then my favorite part of all of this is looking at fraud, waste, and abuse in government spending, Pentagon spending. So I'm going to give you examples of a toilet seat cover. I'm going to give you examples of a diode, an Allen wrench, a monkey wrench, a screwdriver, and I'm going to show you side-by-side comparison what we as taxpayers basically paid for it at the Pentagon and what we would pay for it at Home Depot. And we're going to see who gets the best price here. But when you go through the material, you'll see that this fraud, waste, and abuse is just off the charts here, and that's what I'm going to be talking about tomorrow.
All right,
that's great, Michael. I'm really looking forward to it. Congratulations!
I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah. I think you're gonna. You're one of my favorite people on the planet, and I got one name for everybody as we're going out the door, especially for the folks in the chat. Max Spear mysteriously dies in Poland. I put the story into, or I'll put the story into our chat if somebody wants to post it up. A fairly recent one, and it doesn't add up. Nothing adds up about how he died.
Well, there's been a lot of stories that could have been suicide, could have been murder. Forresto comes to mind. I mean, the story's always been that he jumped out the window the day before he was supposed to go home, which was a little odd. But if you look at the entire story, the whole thing is odd that he would do that. But it could have been suicide. But there has been people that died mysteriously in the ufology field, and I think somewhere or another, Congress, the investigators, everybody are just throwing it to the side. But what I'd like to do now is I'd like to open up to the group questions for Michael. Let's put Michael on the hot seat a little bit. Anybody have any questions for Michael?
Yeah, Michael.
Yep.
What are your plans Monday evening? Because since your new show is debuting tomorrow,
Okay.
I'd love to have you as a guest on my Monday DMR if you're available.
Okay. I have a live to do on my YouTube channel Monday, but I'm available Tuesday or anything past that time frame. So Monday I'm busy. Wednesday I'm busy, but I'm free the other days.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, DMR doesn't run those other days. All
Okay.
right.
All right. Well, Martin, go ahead.
Oh, what do you think a lot of what people are seeing in the sky really are?
Personally, I think a significant majority are our aircraft. In fact, I will just mention some of the things that Bill Scott had mentioned. And Bill Scott was the former Rocky Mountain editor of Aviation Week and Space Technology. And he had developed correspondence with people within the defense contractor industry, people who worked at Air Force Plane 42, people who worked on the Northrop B-2 stealth bomber. I'm talking about the heavy duty people here. And just to be very brief, because I know we're closing up here, but he said that whenever, and he had these correspondence with these military personnel, whenever there was a sighting of one of our classified birds, this gentleman told Bill Scott that they would paint this thing with the UFO brush. So in essence, they're trying to hide their own deep black programs with the UFO brush. And so Bill asked this guy, he said, what are you guys doing? Why are you doing this? And he said, well, we like to flood the media with all these stories of ETs and UFOs. And, it's worked for 50 years. Why would we stop doing it now? This is directly from defense contractors. Why would we stop doing now? And so Bill turned to this guy and he said, you mean to tell me that, you're painting the UFO brush with all these aircraft are being painted with the UFO brush? And the guy said, yeah, that's what we're doing. And he said, why would you do that? And he said, to keep people like you from looking any further.
Mike,
That's what he said.
really quick.
Yep.
Tic Tac, ours or ET?
One of ours. It's a blue on blue situation. Blue on blue situation.
Thank you.
Yep.
Explain blue on blue, Michael.
Blue on blue. Air Force on Air Force. So pilots chasing our
Friendly on friendly.
Friendly on friendly. Okay.
And
for the
I
people who didn't
absolutely
know that.
promise everyone, I did not prearrange that answer. I have not asked Michael that question.
You made me a believer in that. I said that was extraterrestrial and stuff. And you made me a believer. I did some research and I go, you know what? That's got to be ours. And that's a hell of a thing to have. Well,
Thank you to the greatest audience on the planet. Thanks for
I
tuning
disagree
in.
with you all, but that's okay.
Martin, you're the best. You really are. All right. Well, listen, folks, this has been another program at UAP Crossfire with Don Eckert, Commander Cobra, Martin Willis, and of course, our special guest, Michael Schratt, who you got to listen to tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, his show. I'm Chris DiPerno. Stay safe and good night, everybody.
Ciao.